reside in Chesapeake Beach in Calvert County, Maryland. I own my business is currently located in Dunkirk, Maryland, also in Calvert. Let's see, a little bit about me. Before going to the University of Maryland, I bounced around from a few different careers, including a stint in the Navy. I spent hospital corpsman before, and then after that, spent a few years in construction management. And then in 2016, decided to go back to school, get my degree, and that's where I got my degree in kinesiology. Immediately after graduating in 2018, I opened up Maryland Strength and Human Performance, which started in September of 2018. I just currently went through a relocation. I was in Laurel, Maryland. And then, as I said, I'm now in Dunkirk. We offer personal training, sports performance, and nutrition coaching.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jessica, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your organization or your company?
Yeah, there we go. So my name is Jess. I started off as a traditional physical therapist in the outpatient orthopedic setting. I was originally located in San Diego, so we did a lot of athletic performance with board sports, so surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, you name it. And at the same time, around the same time, I also got my yoga instructor certification and started to do yoga, concierge, PT, and wellness combined in people's homes through a cash-based practice. So from there, my partner is also in the Navy, so we relocated to Boston, and I started out initially doing outpatient orthopedic practice there, and then decided to open up my own practice, mainly focusing on women's health, pelvic health, and then also incorporating like a lot of techniques that I had learned through yoga and a more holistic mind-body approach to that. So that's kind of where I'm at now. We are planning to move to Japan in July. So a lot of what I've been doing from 2018 to 2019 has been making everything digital, which ironically is all that we can kind of do right now. So I do a lot of virtual wellness consults, digital on-demand stuff for clients and patients, and really have been dabbling a lot in the entrepreneurial sense in that field, which is pretty far from where I initially started with physical therapy, but I think is a really exciting field to be pioneering into. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica. Angie, would you mind sharing next a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have a similar background to Jessica. I started out in traditional physical therapy and did not end up there now. So hopefully that will give some of the students interested in PT an idea of how the profession can evolve, because it is a little daunting when you graduate. It seems kind of cookie cutter. So hopefully we'll change that message here. I initially came to Maryland as an undergrad in architecture. So my first couple years, I was an architecture major and I was not happy with it. I liked the idea of form and function, but I was an athlete. And very quickly after joining the University of Maryland Gymkhana troupe on campus, which is in the School of Public Health, I realized that I wanted to move into something else. So I found my way to kinesiology, graduated in 2006, and went on to get my doctorate in physical therapy in 2009. I worked in an outpatient clinic in Laurel and Odenton, Maryland, from basically a tech through to a clinic director. And I was with them for the better part of 13 years. They were a traditional hands-on PT clinic. So I would call them a generic clinic. They had a really strong manual therapy background when I first started. And like a lot of big physical therapy clinics, their ownership changed during my time there. So in 2014, 2015, it became clear that I wasn't going to stay for the long term. So I started thinking about what I wanted to do with my career moving forward. And I have been an acrobat, a gymnast, a circus performer since I was about 9 years old. And I love these things. And they're really underrepresented in the healthcare field because they're not well understood. So I've been coaching the University of Maryland's Gymkhana team for probably 13, 14 years now, ever since I graduated. And in 2017, I left my job and opened Acro PT and Fitness, where I have basically built the practice around, we'll see all patients. We are primarily a cash-based practice. We do take some insurance on a limited basis, but we focus on gymnasts, acrobats, circus performers, yogis, pole dancers, pole enthusiasts, the non-traditional sort of unique sports that I was really drawn to as a kid, and honestly as an adult I still train and perform. So we're located in College Park, Maryland. That's where I reside. My husband coaches the University of Maryland Gymkhana team full-time, and I coach part-time, so we stay close to the university. And we're really small. It's myself and one other therapist right now, and we have a personal trainer on staff, and we do a lot of non-traditional things. I travel to conferences and teach aerial, so circus and gymnastic injury prevention across the country at things like PoleCon, which is a pole enthusiast fitness convention. I travel to aerial studios and do seminars on injury prevention, and that's like the aerial silks and fabrics. And then I've worked with some local gymnastics gyms, specifically looking at common injuries and training errors. So that's my background in a nutshell.
That's great. Thank you all for sharing a little bit about yourselves and kind of your companies, your specialties. Kind of moving into thinking about what those specialties are. I know a few of you touched on kind of your background experience, how you kind of got to where you are in your career. Can you talk a little bit about how you identified your quote unquote brand, and kind of what that process was like in kind of developing and forming your own organizations or companies?
I can start it off, I guess. So for me, when I left outpatient orthopedic practice to kind of start my own thing, my own brand, quote unquote, I think the most important thing for me, and I think is ever evolving, is who you want to serve and like what are your core principles that you want to carry and represent in your business. So for me, in the traditional outpatient orthopedic sense, like Angie said, it felt a little bit cookie cutter. It felt a little bit stuffy. There felt like there wasn't a lot of autonomy for patients, clients to really feel empowered by their own abilities. So really in developing my brand, it was who are the people that I'm serving? How do I want to be viewed as a brand? Because I also wanted myself to be part of the brand and not just be like this faceless company. And how was I going to be reaching people? So I think that was a very big driver. And I think, as I mentioned, as I'm moving and evolving, coming back to those cornerstones is super important, because as a business, you're never going to be the same. Things are going to come up, you're going to change, you're going to evolve, you're going to grow. So really making sure that you're staying true to your foundation of like why you started this in the first place, I think is really important, and at least was really helpful and impactful for me in creating what my business is and what it will continue to be.
All right. So I'll go. Actually, so mine kind of piggybacks off of that. You know, it very much goes back to really your kind of your roots. I mean, I originally started my company as what I thought was going to be a sports performance company, where I wanted to work with mostly youth athletes. But what I found getting into it, about even just a few months in, I realized that it wasn't just about the youth athlete. As much as I like helping youth athletes, it was more about being able to help anyone, being able to be impactful on their fitness. So it took me a little bit, and I think it's still evolving. I think it will always evolve as far as, you know, my actual brand. But it really took me getting a mentor and figuring out what did I want, you know, what I wanted to do, and what it came down to was helping people. You know, I started out there, you know, that was the kind of the hard question. And then the next question was, what was my vision? What did I see? You know, how did I want to make my statement or my impact on my community and the people that, you know, that I was around, not just athletes, but, you know, the general population as well. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, is kind of how like I said, I think it's always going to be evolving. You know, I'm looking more towards helping people with nutrition, you know, in the future. Right now, it's more of the fitness aspect, but I really want to start diving a little bit deeper. So, yeah, so I see it changing.
Awesome. So I'm going to be kind of piggybacking off of both Jessica and Bryan's statement. I think that they hit on some really important points that I'd jotted down in advance here. And developing my brand was about, one, deciding what I wanted to do, what really inspired me. And being a PT in a cookie cutter practice for so long, I saw under original ownership, phenomenal branding and consistency with product, and under the new ownership, basically a complete loss of identity within the practice. And so when I left to start Acro, I wanted to brand myself as a physical therapist whose desire was to work with individuals who were pursuing their own unique individuality. So I wanted to create something that was unique for the athlete or the weekend warrior or whomever I was working with around whatever their goal might have been. And to do that, I wanted to insert myself as sort of this unique, non-standard individual in it. So I challenged myself to do everything that the previous company I had worked for told me would never work in physical therapy. Because I felt that if I was going to create something new and different and really be inspired in the profession, I needed to go all in and do so aggressively. So my previous job, they said that when you're marketing to physical therapy patients, you're only going to reach patients within 6 miles of your clinic. So I have patients that travel from New York City. I have patients that drive up from Herndon, Virginia. I have a patient that flies up from Florida to see me, because the niche that I'm in is so unique. They'll come from anywhere to work with me for the circus and acrobatic background. I was always told that people won't pay cash for physical therapy. They'll only pay through their insurance because that's the healthcare model the US is built off of. And so I started my practice on cash-based physical therapy with no loans to see if I could build a brand around quality for financial value, because one of the things insurance has done to physical therapy as a practice and profession is devalued it. And then the final thing I built myself on was consistency. My previous clinics said they could fix everything on everyone at any time, anywhere. And it's like going to buy food at a restaurant. If you have the best cheeseburgers, the best Chinese food, the best sushi, and the best pizza, you probably have none of the above. So instead of me treating Medicare and stroke and neurological dysfunction and looking into, you know, post-surgical and other, you know, chronic pain specialties like fibromyalgia or this and that, and getting so broad in my physical therapy specialty and getting lost in that, I said, this is what I treat. And when people would call and ask, do you treat this? I would say no. And I would refer them away from my brand. So I built the brand and basically the opposite of standard physical therapy. So consistency with myself, reaching the type of client I want, regardless of location, and then making sure I was building value in my practice on cash instead of just insurance. So making PT less associated with this sort of healthcare machine than most healthcare practices in the US.
Great, thank you. And Angie, I love that. Yeah, sometimes knowing or creating our brand is just as much knowing what we aren't as it is knowing what we are. So I really like that you kind of made that point about, you know, referring out if you're like, nope, that's not what I do. So thank you all for sharing that. We have our first student question. So have any of you ever thought about getting an MBA? And there's a second part. How did you learn about kind of the business, the running the business aspects of the kind of management side of running a business while majoring or coming from a STEM major?
Yeah. That's...
I could start since everyone else took the lead before. I'll jump off. So I thought about an MBA briefly, simply for the perceived value of additional education, but quickly realized that an MBA, relative to what I was trying to pursue and create, was more theoretical and less practical. So having gone through and done the undergraduate and the graduate work in a completely science-based field, there is very little training for running a business in those the coursework and that practice. So rather than go the route of theory, I actually spent time in the previous clinic I was working at as every level of management I could get to other than owner. So I worked as basically the lowest level PT aide in the clinic when I first started with them. I worked front desk. I did billing and auth while I was still a student. I worked up to, being a PT once I graduated. I worked as a sort of mentor to another PT when I was there for a couple of years. And then I became a clinic director and really learned a little bit about the business in that role. You get a little bit of knowledge, the sort of your middle management. So it's tricky because they hold some things back, but you do get to see day-to-day operations. And you learn that the most challenging part of a business is actually the people that you must manage if you decide to go that route, and not so much learning about taxes or accounting or QuickBooks. All these things are phenomenally, not simple, but accessible with everything online that you can research, and because the programs are designed to be learned by doing. So you get as much wrong as you get right. And then if you take the time to learn from those mistakes, you develop a business plan and business model, that is an ongoing work in progress. And that's sort of how I got here.
Yeah, so similar to Angie, I had briefly thought about going for a higher level education for business. I had always known that I wanted to open a sports performance or some type of personal training studio, but it wasn't. But business, I think I had enough experience in the personal training side of things where I knew that I could get clients, and that was the biggest part, was getting clients. Little did I know, and I later found this out, was that I did need some direction. And I actually found that direction by finding a mentor. And not just, so I had my strength and conditioning mentors that I had worked with over the years, but I didn't have somebody that knew how to direct me into my business decisions. So I actually researched and found a gym mentorship business, and they kind of provided me the foundation that I needed to run my business. And I work with them every day for the most part. I have mentorship calls and I discuss business decisions and things like that. So a lot of that has helped me and my business grow to where it is at this point.
Yeah, I think similarly along the lines of what everyone was saying, initially when I left full-time outpatient, I did consider getting an MBA. But to be 100% honest, I graduated Maryland, and then 5 days later started my physical therapy program, and really hadn't been out of school for like a good enough time. And I just really didn't want to go back. So in addition, I think also I found I hate to be cliche, but like a recovering perfectionist. When I first started out, I was like, I'm going to have all the structures in place. Like my appointment calendar is going to be great. Like everything, all the interfacing is going to be super great. And pretty much learned to do that on the fly with all of like the digital stuff. And then kind of realized I also had a business mentor for a little bit, and then realized that all of the real learning benefits that I was getting and all of the things that were working in my business came from fellow entrepreneurs who were in different spaces than mine. So not in health and wellness, like digital marketing, social media management, all of these little pieces that weren't exactly what I was trying to build. That's actually what helped me the most in developing the business side of it. And I would be 100% lying to you if I told you that I was like an expert by now. Like I still have ways to go through my website, still could benefit from upgrading XYZ, but I think really surrounding yourself and joining networks and groups of other entrepreneurs and business professionals for me was the most helpful. Then going back to school, and again, like Angie said, learning the theories behind business instead of going and driving home a more practical learning experience from other people through their trial and error, through what worked for them. And the reason why I think using those people to kind of learn from instead of someone that was exactly in what I'm doing, granted, like I think it's important to always feel like what you're doing is special and unique, but in my same line of work, was because I also didn't want to build my business so that it's a mirror image or cookie cutter image of someone else in my field. So really pulling from other spaces, I think, was the most helpful for me creatively, but then also business structure wise. And like I said, is ever evolving, especially now that pretty much all of my business is going to be virtual. I'm going to definitely lean in heavy to all of the people that I know that are in the virtual space for whatever they do.
Excellent. Thank you all. And that was a great question coming from our participants. So please keep those questions coming. In the meantime, I'm going to move on to another one of our prepared ones. So we talked a little bit about kind of how you identified your brand, a little bit about kind of how you built your business, like learned that business side of it. If there was one skill that you would say was essential to master in kind of building that brand, what would each of you say students should really identify and work on right now?
I have one that comes like immediately to the top of my head, and it's not necessarily a skill I think that you can perfect. I think it's just one that is a mindset you have to adapt, is literally adaptability. Things are constantly changing. As you can see with the current climate of things, people have had to adapt on the fly to keep their businesses running. And if you're in a mindset of this is the one way that this is going to work, this is the one outlet, the one road to success, to be frank, it's not going to work, because every day new things are coming up. Every day new obstacles are going to come up. And so instead of looking at it not going the way you planned as like a failure, it's an opportunity for you to pivot and an opportunity for you to really find your resilience and creativity in finding a solution. So I think even now that's something that I'm constantly coming up with is adaptability. Okay, how can I make this accessible more so for clients? How can I continue up leveling my social media brand? How can I, continuously adapt? And especially right now, I think that that's definitely tested that. So if you can get in that mindset ahead of time and just like immediately know that whatever you're picturing in your mind as what your business is going to look like, learning to be okay with it, with the fact that that's not how it's going to look, I think has been really helpful in just like managing and continuing to up level whatever it is that I'm offering.
You want to go, Angie?
Sure. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So mine's going to sound like an opposite statement to Jessica's in just the word, but it's absolutely not. I completely think that adaptability is huge. The word I would use is consistency, but I'm not going to use that in consistency to an idea, but rather consistency to a goal. So what you want out of your business has to stay sort of in your mindset. You can't lose focus from it at any point, because the changing climate that Jessica talked about is very much a real thing, and it's going to pull you in every different direction. And if you let it, it's very easy to sort of slide down a different road than you intended to travel, because at that point it seems like the most obvious choice, or it seems easier, or it's potentially the only option for you. And you want to go down a road intentionally. So even right now, like I'm not seeing patients in clinic because it's just not, it's not safe. It goes against this sort of first healthcare rule of do no harm. I'm a hands-on PT, so that is what I believe I want to be doing. But my consistency goal is to always pursue individuality, whether it's in my practice or for my patients. And it's this sort of little mindset that I have on all my stuff, over my door, everywhere I go. And everything I do is about pursuing individuality, and in that moment, providing the best possible care available to the patients I see in a way that means the most to me. So I can do that no matter whether it's digital, over the phone, if I'm seeing clients in clinic. But if I let myself deviate from that, I run the risk of what I watched happen with my previous practice, where I was just a director and not an owner. They opened with the idea of being the best physical therapy clinic, and then they got lost in the idea of being a bigger physical therapy clinic, or getting larger, or seeing more clients, or they kind of lost sight of what their original plan and goal was. So for me to maintain this brand, I always have to, and I try to do it on a monthly basis. Why did I open, and what was my goal? And if your goal is to have a super successful business, that's not a good goal. You need to have a purpose that's driven intrinsically by what you want out of your life and your business, because having a successful business is going to tear you all away from where you wanted to go initially, and you're gonna disappear in sort of the middle of the road. So I think the adaptability part is huge, because that falls under the consistency part for me, where if I didn't know what I wanted and I didn't keep that hanging over my head, I could easily become distracted by all the changing factors. So.
Yeah, so both of those are great. Adaptability and consistency are definitely, I think, two huge essential skills. And I think any business should follow along those lines, especially with what Angie was just talking about, having that vision and then kind of coming up with a plan for that vision. And then your step by step, how are we going to get to that vision, and then be able to grow from there. So very important, I think, with that one. And then as far as adaptability, we all are going through it right now. Mine is more of a mindset. It'd always be a white belt. So I think Bruce Lee made that statement, but basically what that comes down to is always be willing to learn. For me, I thought I was just going to be a personal trainer, and here I am, an entrepreneur now. And the things I've had to learn to be a business owner, that basically where I had to push aside being a personal trainer, being a strength coach, strength and conditioning coach, to now be an entrepreneur, you kind of have to learn a bunch of different skill sets. So being able to learn, being able to, start, even be able to go from the beginning again, don't be afraid to go from the beginning. So always be a white belt. It would be my skill.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, we had another question come in and I was trying to find where it had gone. So as a reminder, to those of you who may have questions, we are typing them into using the chat function. So type your questions directly to Lindsay Winter, and she will help get those questions to me so that we can have the panelists address them. So this is from one of our attendees who currently is a psychology major. Is about to graduate and is also a personal trainer and group fitness coach at Epley, our rec center. She's wondering, how did you, sorry, I do not know if that is a male or female. So they are wondering, how did you find and search for mentorship opportunities relating to your niche populations? And what were the most valuable lessons you learned from them in narrowing down your interests?
So for me specifically, for my first priority was just getting experience as a personal trainer. I knew that was the way I wanted to go. So at first it was just getting the experience, and then kind of latching on to those who I felt were leaders in the personal training. So my first job was at a gym. So my boss was basically my mentor, my personal training mentor. And then through his connections, through his education, it kind of branched out from there, and found out who his mentors were and who he had talked to. So kind of expanding from there. And then once I got my experience in sports performance, that's where I started to really dial down into who I saw as being, well, first, if I saw them as being either the top of their game or the top of the game of strength and conditioning, and I really tried to latch onto them. I really tried to learn about them. I tried to, I would reach out to them through emails or, contact through social media, and really try to dive deeper into their practice and how they got to where they are. So yeah, just, starting off broad and then narrowing down, I think was essential for me. What was the second part of that question, Lauren?
No problem. So it was finding your mentorship opportunities related to the niche population, and also what were the most valuable lessons you learned from them to narrow down your interests?
Yeah. So really, what makes you happy? We talked about it earlier, both Jessica and Angie. What kind of gives you that feeling at the end of the day that you've accomplished something? Originally, for me, it was sports performance, because I liked working with youth athletes. I saw like kind of fire, that spark in their eye. But then I started to see that with my general population clients as well. So it really kind of allowed me to reach and work and help more people, essentially.
Yeah, so I actually didn't seek out a mentor to find a niche population. I knew the niche population I wanted, and I decided to start building sort of my brand around that population. Once I dove into the circus and acrobatics community as a student years ago, I built a reputation with people in that field. So circus coaches, circus athletes, professional performers, gymnastics gym coaches, things like that. And so what I ended up building was my skill set as a PT by working as a clinician in an outpatient clinic for a long time. I would definitely agree with Bryan with this idea that in order to get into my niche, I needed to become a phenomenal clinician. Because if there is one thing I can guarantee, if you take on a management role or an owner's position in a business, there is a lull in your clinical skills. If you're a clinician, I'm sure it happens when you're a personal trainer too, because your education stops going from treating and providing fitness related ideas to how do I pay my employees? How do I file for SDAT taxes? How do I run QuickBooks? So there's this lull in your clinical skill set. So if I was, describing my progression into a niche, I would say I became a physical therapist. I became a employee in a clinic. I learned how to be a physical therapist from, the basic standard. And then I found that I loved hands-on therapy. I loved manual therapy, osteopathic therapy. So I went and found mentors in those fields, took classes, got certifications, latched on to the one owner of my practice where I was an employee, his business model and his value and concern over employees. And I thought that was a great way to treat your staff. And I always felt valued. So I latched onto that. When he left the practice, then it was merely sort of taking all these things I'd learned and creating this idea of a practice and following that. When I broke into circus and acrobatic sort of physical therapy, there were 4 clinicians, myself included, nationwide back in 2017 that were seeing this population. One of them was treating in a clinic in Seattle and also doing some work online. Another one was treating in Canada and exclusively doing digital fitness and wellness assessments. She dropped out of PT. And the third one was working in the California area, and she was a professional performer who was providing flexibility and contortion programs as a former physical therapist. So very different types of practice. And we all sort of got together, created a Facebook group that now has like 40 or 50 clinicians. So it's kind of grown since then. So I didn't really have a mentor in the field. I just kind of took examples from other places and built my craft before I decided to build my business.
Okay, sorry. I'm home and my dog was like going crazy, so I just wanted to mute myself to save you guys the extra noise. So I have a similar path, I guess, as Angie. I initially, so once I started going more of the virtual route to find my niche, it honestly came from my following and what people needed. And I found as I was practicing, even with my one-on-one clients, that there's a huge deficit in the mental aspect of healing and therapy, as well as women's health and the knowledge of like the hormonal cycle and how that plays into training and pain and all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't say that that was like my mentor, but I essentially found my niche through the needs of the people that I was sharing content with, the needs of the people that I was working with, and then went on to do more training. So as Bryan mentioned, he kind of found mentors that he trained. I found people in the specialties that I was looking for. So not necessarily PT related, but I got certified in prenatal yoga, and then for a little bit was contemplating whether I wanted to do doula work. And so I think one of the things that really impacted me from my mentors in that space, when I was kind of like, do I want to do PT? Do I want to do wellness coaching? Like, what am I offering? I don't know. It came down to, I remember my mentor, she asked me, why do you want to become a doula? And this had nothing to do with my business, but just kind of like threw the question out there. And I answered with like a very clarifying question of like, I want to help women feel empowered by their own body and not feel like they need someone else or need something else to tell them how to live and feel, both from an emotional, mental, and physical standpoint. And she was like, you basically just answered your question, because whatever you do, as long as it stays true to, again, going back to that foundation of why you're serving, whatever you do, whether it's doula work, yoga work, coaching, whatever, is going to be your niche, because that's what you're passionate about. So I think in terms of, and I think the student that asked that question was a psychology major, which not that I have any regrets, but if I could go back, I would have loved to do that as an undergrad, because in PT school and the work that I do, half of what it is understanding mental and emotional health, and we don't get trained in that at all. So that's something that I've had to learn intuitively, learn during like my actual work, as well as continuing education in like somatic health, mind, body health, that kind of stuff. So in terms of finding a mentor, I think I definitely also struggled with that a little bit, because I was like, I don't have a mentor. What am I going to do? Like, I don't have someone to tell me how to get where I need to go. And I think it ultimately depends on where you are in your style. So for me right now, like I am my own mentor, because I'm just going with my gut and trusting that what I'm doing is moving me in the right direction. And I think that's working for me now, versus like Bryan mentioned, having people to kind of be a soundboard for you is also helpful. So I think really expanding your network and seeing what works for you, and then allowing the things that you learn from them or learn from others that you feel are beneficial to sit with you, and then let go of the rest that doesn't.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing those perspectives and experiences. So our next question from a student, it kind of tailors on, you know, we've talked about how do you identify the brand, kind of what skills are essential in doing that. But when you actually think about kind of taking that first step into creating the business, so the question is, what are those first steps? And is there, if a student is considering doing that, what would you recommend they should do right now to begin that process?
So I would say that you students graduating now have a really unique opportunity that probably didn't exist back in 2006 when I was graduating undergrad. And that is that the world is a digital world. If you know that you have an interest, then I would strongly encourage you to take that passion and connect with others online through that interest. So I love circus and gymnastics and acrobatics. If I was graduating now, I would continue on with my professional training relative to PT, but I would make sure that I was making connections in the field, in the specifically the niche area I wanted to build my brand online as a consumer of those products. So you are graduating, you have an undergraduate degree ahead of you or underneath your belt, but you are exceptionally green. And that's a good thing. That means that you are just able to take in information anywhere you go. So getting into classes relative to things you want to work with. If you want to work with athletes, get to know those athletes. I have a friend of mine who's a PT, and he opened a coaching practice while he was finishing undergrad for triathlon training, because he's a triathlete, excuse me. And he built a name for himself as an athlete and then a coach and a supporter of that type of sport. And now that he's 2 years into his PT career, that's where he's transitioning from being a general PT to hopefully becoming a PT in a triathlete sort of focus. So build your brand relative to you as a consumer of the product you eventually want to specialize in and sell. And then while you're doing that, simultaneously build your skill set for the profession you want to go into, because you're going to be a much better provider for whatever service you end up being or selling in your business if you've been a consumer first, and if you know the people in your field. So like Jessica said, you can know what your clients are going to need because you've walked the walk and you've talked the talk. If people get to know you, they're going to like you, they're going to feel connected to you, they're going to be emotionally involved with you. And then when you open a business that markets to something that they know you for, they're going to come to you for that service. So don't be afraid to dip your toe in the pond now as a student who's about to graduate, as a consumer of the product, as somebody that's interested in that area. You don't have to be the name on the top of that pyramid. You can just be in it to start. And that's going to give you a chance to really like learn by osmosis, by watching others around you as to what the market really needs.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, if you think of an airplane, right, and the takeoff of it, it doesn't just go from the ground to the sky. There's a gradual progression of how it gets there. So I think initially it's super important to really know what you want to offer. And in order to do that, again, like Angie said, you need to be emerging and immersing yourself in the content. So as a new grad, I wouldn't say, you can obviously, create your LLC. It's super easy and takes like 30 minutes. Or even less than that. But I think what even more importantly would be to explore and give yourself a little breathing room to see what you like. That was a mistake that I actually made. Initially, when I started this, I made the LLC and I was like, this is what I offer. And then as I started learning, I was like, I kind of want to do it like this. I kind of want to do it like this, which is not bad. But as my consumers were watching me grow, it got a little bit confusing as to what I was offering as I was learning and as I was wanting to share it. So I think it would be super important to really give yourself the time to experience and learn, continue learning. And that's not to say that you can't make the jump, but just making sure that you are really finding your footing in a space that feels good and feels authentic to you as what you want to offer. I think is super important. So that was kind of like a roundabout way of saying it, but really learning and really taking that time and that pause, because as a new grad, you have so much time ahead of you to create that business. So once you are there and once you have that, then I think it'll be a lot easier if you know the foundation that you're already in versus like starting it and then having to rework it every time.
Yeah, I would echo both answers. I mean, Angie's was pretty, I was nodding my head the whole time. I don't think I would have said much different. And then same with Jessica. The one thing I will say, and Jessica, you said it, that, there's nothing wrong with having to backtrack a little bit to restart. And that's kind of what happened with me. I started because immediately out of the gate, I knew I wanted to work with sports performance and youth athletes, but I wasn't sure exactly what that meant. I wasn't sure exactly what that meant for the market, and I wasn't exactly sure what that meant for me. How was my time going to be spent? I knew a lot about sports performance. I was an athlete myself. I knew that I liked working with beginners, but it was, but what I didn't realize was that the same satisfaction that I got out of working with athletes, I could also get with working with anyone. So, you know, finding out what you want and in your business. And the first question, if you work with a mentor, the first question that they're going to ask you, that I was asked, is what do you want to do? So figuring out what you want to do is going to be the most important thing before you start your business. That's, you know, researching, figuring that out is going to be your key there to getting started with your business.
Just want to say, like, and I was in this position as a new grad, if you're sitting there thinking, I don't actually know what I want to do, does that mean I can't start? It's not the case. And that's not, you know, what I'm trying to say at all. I definitely think, like, if you want to do something and you start it, the path will go in the direction that it's supposed to with time. Just making, you know, just trusting yourself and taking the time that you need to really reflect and think about that. So I just like had a flashback of like when I was leaving school and I was like, I don't actually know what I want to do. And like knowing that that's okay, because like all the people that are sitting before you have had, I'm sure, their ups and downs, and like look at where they are now. So
100%.
just knowing that and trusting yourself.
Yeah, that's 100%. I mean, I didn't go to college until I was 31. So you'll be fine. You have time.
Yeah, for those of you out there that are in any way similar to me, when I graduated, I felt like I had to have my entire life mapped out. So I was going to do X by 25, you know, Y by 30, Z by 35. There is a risk of running out of the gate a little too fast. You want to make sure that you give yourself time to develop you before you try to develop a business. Because if you develop a business and you don't develop you, you run the risk of your reputation not showcasing your true skill set, because we change as we learn and as we grow. So building a brand is if anything, is more important than buying that or getting the LLC and opening the bank account and creating the business website. Build you through training and shadowing and working and blogging and researching and taking classes. And while you're doing that, you're going to find a way to create this online presence that eventually becomes your marketing tool in this digital world for your business or for your practice. But don't let yourself think that you have to create the business today. You have to create the LLC tomorrow. You have to, because all those things come with a certain amount of responsibility. But once the name is out there, the brand begins to build itself. So I would strongly encourage you to build your brand, and then eventually open your practice or open your business. Because you want to make sure that the reputation you start with is the one you want people to know you for.
All right, thank you all. Well, we are getting a little bit close to that 5 o'clock time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So I'm going to go ahead and close off by just asking everyone. So I was originally going to ask, you know, in this time of COVID, and we're all on lockdown and everything's virtual and we're all trying to figure it out, you know, what can students be doing now to be prepared for the pandemic? But I think kind of everyone answered that, and I think we all kind of touched on it a little bit. So I'll give you an option of 2 questions that I think would be interesting for students. You can answer both or either. So, you know, in this time, in these uncertain times, what's something students can be doing now to build their brand or work towards building their brand while we're all kind of locked inside? Or also, a lot of you, each of you has mentioned in some way, you know, kind of either trying to stay true to the brand or update or make sure that everything, as you're growing the business, you're still accurately representing yourself and representing what the business is. So how do you update kind of yourself and your business? How do you kind of touch base with yourself and making sure that you're staying relevant? So either one of those, I welcome whoever wants to jump in.
I guess I can go. So I'm going to speak more to my current business, which is mainly virtual and through social media. So in terms of saying one thing that you can be doing now, I've actually been talking with a few DPT students in the Boston area that are wanting to do this and wanting to build that social media presence. If you're on Instagram, you know, like there's a lot of educational content out there, and a lot of the same questions being brought up of like, what do I post? How do I do it? What am I supposed to do? Kind of getting in this like perfectionism paralysis of like, if what I put out isn't perfect, then it's not worth doing. And it's the total opposite. I think, again, like it's a learning process. So if you're wanting to do something virtually and do something like an actual act aside from the learning and absorbing knowledge, start posting what you're doing. I think with the virtual space, especially if you are your brand, in terms of also staying relevant, people want to see you and they want to see what you have to offer. You know, there could be 10 million PTs or personal trainers that are all like top-notch people, but at the end of the day, people are going to go towards the people that they gravitate towards and their personality and their vibe, I guess. So just start putting out stuff, start looking at things that you are drawn to you, and without necessarily copying that stuff, see if you can rework it into something that fits you. And that'll be a nice way to, again, evolve yourself so that when you do start the business, you're at a place kind of where you're like already established. And then in terms of staying relevant and staying true to yourself, always, again, look at if you're looking for something service oriented and picturing the person that you're going to be working with sitting in front of you, like what does that person look like? What does that person do? What is your ideal client? And then continuing to speak to that, I think are like two main things. So just put yourself out there and really stay true to your soul client and who you really want to be working with.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, I'm not going to go too much into this, but basically the way you do that, no one knows any, or trying to think of how to say this. Basically, you know yourself better than anyone. So that's the best way to get yourself out there, you know, through your experiences. There's a reason why you're choosing the field you're going into or that you're looking to go into. So start talking about that with people. Why do you want to do this? Create your story, or go think back on your story. What has led you to this point? What is going to push you to the future? And then that's the way you can get yourself out there through blogs or Instagram or Facebook, however you want to deliver that message. But that would be the best way, you know, get your experiences out there. No one knows better.
Yeah, I think those are both really valid points that Jessica and Bryan brought up. So I'll instead of talking about the same things, I'll add to that. Find out right now what you don't know about what you want to do. You are going to find, if you do this well, that every week you learn something new, and every week you realize you wish you knew last week what you know today. So if you want to go into physical therapy, because obviously that's the field I know, and you really love working with athletes, but you have no interest in working with a geriatric population, why not use this opportunity in this time to research a little bit about the geriatric population to make sure that you know where you're going to go, so you also know what you don't want, or understand the things you don't know as well. So make this time about building you. So research your field, research what you think you want your business to be, and then maybe take the opportunity to find people that have already done it or that are in that realm, and reach out to them, connect with others, network, and have them help you learn what you don't know yet, because it's really humbling when you realize that you're going to spend a lifetime learning, and you look back on what you knew last year and you're kind of chuckling at yourself to think how naive I was. So take this time to figure out what you don't know about the field you want to go into and what you don't know about the brand you want to build. Write it down. Start researching those things specifically. Start researching things that make you uncomfortable with what you're going to have to do next, whether you're going to PT school or you're going to have to, open an LLC, or you have no idea about taxes and accounting. Start like Googling this stuff just to start diving into the things that, could be challenging, because the hardest part of being a business owner is doing the things that you have no interest in relative to running your business. So take the opportunity while you're stuck at home to check off those boxes would be my suggestion on top of the other two things.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us today, Bryan, Jessica, Angie. Really appreciate you sharing your experiences and all of your insights. I have learned a ton and am super impressed by everything you all have achieved. So I do just want to point out that Lindsay has shared each of our panelists has provided their contact information. Lindsay has shared it in the group chat. So they're all willing to have you follow up with them if you have any additional questions. So that is the way you can reach them. Thank you all for joining today. I'm going to leave the meeting open for a little while just so everyone can still reference that chat. But everyone else, please feel free to go on with the rest of your evening and know that we thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much.
Pleasure, Bryan, Jessica. Nice getting to talk with you.
Yeah, same here.
Well.